Hi folks, welcome back to my new model Barmy channel and welcome back to part 2 of my 1:100th scale FV432 and FV432-30 and Fox armoured car Swingfire missile conversion build. So we'll have a quick recap on what we did in the last part and what we're going to do this time. Okay, so last time I built up a 432 chassis and made up the Fox turret and grafted the two of those together. So essentially this is now largely built, and then we can put that aside. So also built the Fox armoured car with the Swingfire missile turret and a few extra bits of stores and other bits of equipment. So that's what we did last time. So this time around, let's grab the other sprue, which is there. So this time we're going to build the 432 as the vehicle that I drove. So I need to think about doing some internal detail for this. So I'm going to whip most of the bits off the sprue and clean them up, and then we'll see where we go from there. Right, so where am I at now? So what I've done, I've drilled out the driver's hatch. So I want to model this open, so I shall make a new hatch. I've also drilled out the, I don't know whether you can see this, it's quite tiny, the commander's coupler. So that just sits in the top of the hull there. And I've cracked on and built the interior of the 432. So this is just principally plasticard. It's not a exact representation of the interior of a 432. I just wanted to give a bit of detail so that as you peer in through the mortar hatch and the various open hatches, you'd actually see something inside it. So I'm quite happy how that's turned out. So I guess the next step will be to start to think about painting the interior and then closing it up, and then I can crack on with the rest of the build. Right, I hope you can see this clearly. I've now painted the interior, just giving it a bit of a wash as well, so dirty it up a bit. I made sure to include the straps for the driver's seat, because when I drove this 432 I was very conscious that it was a big old thick chunk of armour about 6 inches in front of my nose. So if you're going down a gradient you need to be well restrained. So that's the interior. I think the next thing I've got to do then is start thinking about closing everything up and make some hatches as well. Right, this is where we're at now. Let's get that in focus. The 432's closed up. It's only when you can get a coat of primer on these little models that you really appreciate the amount of detail on them, despite their tiny scale. So this, remembers, is 1/100th. But I mean, just looking at the wheels and the quality of the mouldings, they are absolutely superb and put a lot of 1/72nd kits to shame. You know, the actual construction is quite simplistic, but they are beautifully detailed, and the moulding is really crisp. So anyway, I've added a towing cable there, which was just fuse wire, which I stuck in a drill and wound it round to make up a cable. Bear in mind I'm basing this on the vehicle that I drove, so it had some modifications to it. So I've extended the exhaust at the back. I've added a beacon on the back there, which will be a sort of an amber flashing beacon, and as you can see I've masked up with some foam so that my overspray doesn't go inside. One thing I did revisit on the 432-30 was I overlooked the fact that the front hatch, which would normally be the commander's hatch if it had been the unturreted version, was faired over. It didn't appear to have a hatch as such. And I took a photo of the 43230 that they've got at Bovington in the restoration hall. I'll flash up a picture of that now. So as you can see, it's in a little bit of a state. I'd really hope they do refurbish that and repaint the Berlin Brigade colours that it is in currently, although well worn. So it'd be lovely to see that in the main exhibition hall. Anyway, here's hoping. So that's a modification, and as you can see, I've primed that. So I guess the next step for the original 432, or the one that I drove, is a coat of NATO green, and then we'll go from there. Oh, incidentally, before I apply the green to the hull itself, I've done some extra detail touches to the hatches. So these two hatches for the mortar hatch covers rather, they were in the kit, but I've detailed them, so I've included some latches now. The two other hatches, so the commander's hatch and the driver's hatch, I've had to scratch build. So I think there's 5 components in that one, and there's 8 components in that one there. So yes, I am insane. Okay, so now you'll see that I've done all the basic painting now on the model of the 432 that I drove, and as you can see, I've applied the open hatches, put some mirrors on because the vehicle that I drove had mirrors. I've still got to put a reflective mirror type finish on the mirrors. But other than that, pretty pleased how this has turned out so far. So I've got to weather it next, but I'm happy with that so far. So that's the 432 painted. I've got to find some decals as well from somewhere. Have a look through my scrap box. So let's take him off, and we're just going to put the. So that's the Fox, all painted up. And in a sort of what if it, firstly, what if it existed, a Fox with the Swingfire turret, and what would it have looked like perhaps if it had deployed to Desert Storm. So once again, got some weathering to do on that one. So happy with how that's looking so far. I like the camouflage netting. I think that works really well with milliput. So that's a technique that I should probably use again. So let's take him off, and the one that really strained the old eyes, that's the 43230 in the Berlin Brigade camo. Now this had far too many lumps and bumps to mask up and spray, so I have to admit I actually painted this freehand, which was a challenge, but I always knew that this paint job was going to be a challenge in that size. So just to give it scale, there's my finger. So it just illustrates how tiny these models are. So that was just a coat of white, and I used a Vallejo. I think it was flat. Where are we? Flat US brown, something like that, and a sort of light neutral grey. The colours look good enough when I was looking at the photographs. So once again, weathering for that next. Right, as you can see, I've now applied the weathering. So this is the Berlin Brigade 43230. So this has just had an oil wash of a black and sort of dark umber. So quite happy how this has turned out. I've also given the wheels and all the running gear a wash of a sort of sandy mud colour. So very happy how that's turned out. Fiddly paint job, but quite satisfying now it's done. So let's whip him off, and then we'll put the little fox on. There we go. So that's now been weathered as well. So I've done some sort of chipping on it, a few little battle scars. Once again, a wash with a dark oil. So quite happy how that one's turned out. And we'll take him off. And finally, the 432, which I modelled as the one that I drove. So that has had a wash of a sort of light sand colour. When I drove it, it was incredibly muddy. So I've sort of modelled this as more like a sort of summer kind of weathering. So more dust than mud. But yeah, I'm really pleased how these turned out. And they're lovely little kits, these Flames of War Team Yankee kits. So I think I'll leave this video there, and maybe I'm going to make some diorama bases, I think, for these three. I might do that as another video. Anyway, I hope you liked it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers.